Okay, we are recording, live streaming to Facebook. You're good to go.
Thank you. All right. We will call to order this August 5th special meeting of the Board of Finance. And I will just do a roll call to start with. Myself, Tim O'Brien is on. Glenn Frischman, are you on?
I'm on conference only.
Mike Fauerbach was probably not going to be here, but Mike, are you on? No. Lynn Young?
Here.
Bob Stachin?
Here.
Deb Norman? Deb is here. And David Motherway. Dave Motherway, are you on? Okay, we still have 5 of the 7 members, so we do have a quorum, so we are good to go. The first item on the agenda is comments from the public. Are there any comments from the public? And I would remind everyone on the call that before you say anything, we need to make sure we identify who we are, as we're all getting used to these virtual meetings more and more. And then we will try and recognize everyone as we go along. So are there any comments from the public at this time? Okay, no comments from the public. Next item on the agenda is previous minutes. In the packet that was sent around to you from Jill, there was 1 set of minutes. And I'm going to apologize because I'm working from home and it's a little challenging here, but we're going to make this all work. So we have draft minutes from the July 1st, 2020 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Glenn Frischman.
Motion from Glenn, a second from Lynn. Is there any discussions, addenda, corrections to the minutes as submitted? Anyone have any corrections, changes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please state your name and say opposed. Hearing none, the minutes unanimously carry. Those are good. New business. Next item is a request from the K-12 Building Committee for a bid waiver for the purchase of AV equipment and the sink replacements for Dean's Mill and West Vine Street school projects. Can I get a motion to approve for the bid waiver for the sinks and the AV equipment, please?
So moved.
Glenn.
Can give it to Glenn.
So I got a motion from Glenn and I've got a second from Deb Norman. Is there discussion on these questions? These are these are a bid waiver only for the Dean's Mill and West Vine, and these are part of the school upgrades that is already funded. They're just looking for the bid waiver for this. Are there any discussion for this?
Why does it say sink replacements?
Well, I think it was the quality of the materials that were originally used, and I apologize. I don't know more about this. I thought Stu Strunk was going to call in to speak to this, but I think it was subpar materials were originally scoped out, and they felt that they wouldn't last based on the usage, and they want to get them done right now while they still have bond money to do it.
So did we blow the money on the subpar ones?
I think so.
Oh.
Well, that was, now my understanding is that was the original ones were the constructed, the ones that were not, these are not ones that were just put in and we're replacing them already. That was my understanding from talking with June. These are upgrading the ones that were pre-existing in there.
In a new school?
In a build as new. So I don't know the exact specifics. June had told me she was going to be available. Something must have come up, or they don't have power, or what we're all dealing with right now.
There's a lot of people. I don't have power. I'm sure a lot of people don't have power.
Yeah, so I think that may be part of it. But these are for the new, well, it's the renovated as new, so they may not have been part of the renovation part. they may be pre-existing. I cannot say for sure or not, but that they have the money. It is already, it's part of the school bonding. They're just looking to to get these bid waivers in place.
This is
Okay,
Bob.
so Mr. Chairman, they have the money. It was in the bond.
Correct. It was.
This
This is already.
This is not new spending.
Correct. This is not a new
This is
spend.
just a bid waiver. Okay.
Well, but it's a new spend in the sense that it's a replacement.
Correct, but it was part of the anticipation, my understanding of the renovate is new and is covered in all those funds.
This is Bob Stachin. Usually when we're having these bid waivers, there's an explanation as to why it's appropriate. The contractor's in place, or that they've sourced it out, and there's minimal contracts available, and there's the most efficient way to do it, or something along those lines. Do we have any of that information as to why a bid waiver is appropriate in this case?
So that's what that's what June was going to be on. She had emailed me that she would be on and had planned to be here to answer all those questions. There is a timeliness because this is a longer lead item. It's about 3 weeks, I believe, for the sinks. I don't know, Jim, do you have that email?
Is that a question to me, Tim? You broke up.
Yes. Do you have the timeline that June had sent as to why she wanted this, why the K-12?
Well, I know they want to get them in before school opens. It's probably not going to happen, but maybe it'll be in a week into it now. But to answer Bob's question specifically, these are quotes off the state bid list anyway. So these have been competitively bid through the state.
So all we're opining on is the bid waiver, not the wisdom of doing it, right?
Correct.
Yes. Correct.
Thanks, Jim. That is helpful. If it comes from the state bid list, then that's a useful step. And I guess the other reason would be the timeliness of it that's been conveyed to Tim through the email, that they're looking to get this done before the school season starts, and this person's in the best position to get that done.
Correct.
Exactly. Correct.
That's what I was led to believe, or what was conveyed to Jim and I both by the K-12 building committee. Other questions or comments? All right. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the bid waiver, please say aye. Say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed, please state your name and state your opposition, please, that you're opposed. Hearing none, the bid waiver is unanimously passed. All right. Next item on the agenda is additional appropriations, review of year-to-date additional appropriations. We've had no changes since the last meeting, so there's nothing to discuss there. Review of year-to-date additional appropriations from fund balance for fiscal 2021. None to date, so nothing to discuss there. Next item is review of the Board of Ed monthly line item transfers and global budget report.
This is Jim Sullivan. I haven't seen anything posted yet. Since the last information you had in front of you, all I did see was, which I got subsequent to me sending the materials out to you, was a memo from the Board of Ed Finance Director to the board saying that he expects them to come in with a surplus of about $360,000 the year end.
Okay. Jim, I just want to be clear. The memo said 360.
Well, 358,000. I was rounding to 360.
Okay, so 358,000 is now what they're anticipating to give back to the Board of Finance, to the town, rather?
Correct.
All right, but we didn't get anything formal from them. So
No,
that's just,
I know we just started August, but as far as municipal accounting goes, it's still early days.
yeah. Yep.
I expect accounts payable invoices to be coming in for the next, 45 days yet. So.
Well, so at one point, didn't they have unexpended funds of 1.4 million?
Well, that's what I show about $1.05 million on the town side, which I don't think has caught up yet with the Board of Ed's, the Education Department's internal accounting. So the number I gave you was what I had it on my GL, but
All right.
I haven't received all their year-end information yet.
Okay. But they're the ones that are saying that based on their own accounting, which I assume is accrual accounting at this point, that we should get back 358.
Thereabouts, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. That's about. I don't know that we've got anything more to discuss on that because we don't really have a whole lot of information there. Next item on the agenda is discussion of the possible project of what is written as preliminary, but it's now written House Bill 6004 with that attached. And so that everyone knows, we have Chris Wardrop, sorry, Chris, my apologies, from USI Insurance, who is our insurance advisor for the town, I believe, correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
And so Jim Sullivan, when I brought this up, asked him to be on the call to just kind of give us an overview. Jim, do you want to kind of preface anything here, or?
Well, the bill itself was 77 pages when it went to the governor. I don't know if there was any edits to it after that point. But as a finance director, a couple of things, concerns immediately popped to mind. And that's, these additional requirements that are going to be imposed on the police department as far as reporting. I heard, I saw it mentioned, dash cams, body cams. I don't know if that's municipalities, just the state. I think some of that still needs to be hashed out, but there could be significant costs involved in complying with some of these mandates. Also, retention and police personnel may become harder if they lose some of their indemnification. That may drive salaries up. So there are financial implications as well as social to be thought about when you're reviewing this bill. And I'll leave it there unless you got any more specific questions.
Chris, is there anything you want to? I'm assuming that you guys have taken a look at this from a liability or from an insurance standpoint. Is there anything you want to add to what Jim said or make us aware of that you all have seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll work to be brief. First, again, thank you for letting me be a part of this. So I'm Chris Wardrop, and we're under contract with the town and the school district. The goal, quite simply, is to help protect people, property, and budgets. I've worked with municipalities here in Connecticut for about 25 years. We work with about 70 public entities here in Connecticut and a bunch of others across the country as part of USI. We're not an insurance company. We're independent. So we represent you. And as it relates to this subject with House Bill 6004, which at this point has been signed by the governor, and obviously it's made the local news and regional and whatnot. What I wanted to do is just point out a few things that I've done research on and lay out the plan to continue to help Jim not just understand the financial impact that we're aware of that might connect to insurance coverage and insurance expenses, but also thinking in terms of a broader risk management perspective. where there may be some non-insurance, but perhaps legal implications. So this is obviously there's a lot of uncertainty with this bill that passed. It went through after a couple weeks of deliberation and discussion at the Capitol. And so there were a lot of people right now that frankly, they're saying, yeah, we just don't know. There's some speculation as to what the impacts will be, both to individual officers, to the municipalities, the law enforcement agencies, et cetera. So, so first off, the town currently has law enforcement liability coverage. I think you already knew that. It's subject to a $5,000 deductible per claim. And there carries a $1 million coverage limit. And then that is bolstered by a very large excess liability tower of liability coverage above that. Okay. And you have a great law enforcement department. I did a quick review of specific law enforcement liability claims within, say, the last 5 years. And there was literally only, knock on wood, one claim that, we see periodically. I won't go into the details on that one, but let's just say that as it relates to this bill, there are some municipalities that have said, okay, well, what are we talking about? How many claims have we had? Could we have had a claim currently that if it had been next year would not have been covered? Okay, so these are some relevant questions that some have asked, and I guarantee will continue to be asked as we make our way through this coming year. So there are 3 sections, and I'll be quick. I'm going to breeze through these, and then I'll answer questions at any point. Section 17, which I do not expect you to look at right now, but you can write it down. It calls for the establishment, if you don't already have one, of a civilian police review board. Okay, and my only point here is to make mention, and Jim knows this, is that our job is to ensure that the individuals who are appointed or selected to a civilian police review board by the town, that there is liability insurance coverage for their decisions or errors or potential omissions that are made in the discharge of their duties on that board. Okay? So what we would be looking at is the law enforcement liability coverage. We would be looking at potentially the public officials liability coverage. And in both cases, the insurance carrier is the Connecticut Interlocal Risk Management Agency, otherwise known as CIRMA. And a number of you probably have heard that acronym or that name before. Okay, so I'm not going to go into Civilian Police Review Board further. In fact, up until I actually did some research on this, I have yet to hear any individual at CCM or anybody else actually bring this topic up. But we try to be very detailed and try to think in terms of the future as to who needs to be protected, how do they need to be protected, and then really, is there an additional cost? And in this case, we would be looking at no additional cost, because I do believe the coverage would be embedded in your existing coverages. Okay. Now, Section 29. This is really this has to do with the use of deadly force. Okay, and there is some concern, especially by the law enforcement community, that if they go into a situation, there's some new criteria. One being, were reasonable de-escalation attempts made or procedures made, and there were some that say, hey, if you are going into a school with an active assailant, it is very difficult to even think from 1/4 second to the next about de-escalation attempts. Are you going to try to negotiate? By the way, for a second there, I thought my computer froze on me, so I apologize if we have any tech issues. So, the question that we have with Section 29, with the use of deadly force and the narrowing in some ways of what is reasonable, is whether or not this will increase the number of law enforcement liability claims made by third parties. We are questioning whether there could be an increase in the dollar value of settlements or the dollar value of awards. And we're speculating right now because we just don't know. And this is not set to take place for, I think it's a year from now under Section 29. The one that's getting the most attention for good reason is Section 41, which deals with qualified immunity. Okay, so what has happened here, again, your existing coverage is in play to protect the town. It protects the law enforcement agency and the leadership. And it also protects the individual officers. Okay, so if they are named in a suit, those officers are, provided defense coverage by KERMA, subject to that $5,000 deductible. Now, each policy, whether it be KERMA and then some other carriers, they do have, a provision in there that if the individual officer in a court of law is deemed to have committed a malicious act, and in the new legislation, they talk about malicious, willful, or wanton acts. In a case like that, if it in a court of law, that officer is no longer provided insurance coverage. Okay. However, prior to that time, they're provided coverage. So there are some questions right now with this new Section 41. They talk about whether or not the acts of individual officers are what we call objectively reasonable. And they have put through this legislation, which people are questioning whether it runs parallel with federal law. We don't know that right now. We just don't know. So what our team is doing is this. We will be in concert with, I'm sure, CCM's and KERMA's legal counsel. They will be looking at whether or not there realistically is going to be a coverage, an insurance coverage implication for the officers effective as of the date that this legislation goes into play, which is July 1st, 2021. Okay. Now, ironically, July 1st, 2021 is when your new law enforcement liability coverage would go into effect. It's not even the current year that just started. So we're still in the beginning of the 10th month before this actually takes place. But what USI is doing is we'll continue to research this. If we find that there is a need to explore individual law enforcement officer liability coverage, then we will do that. In fact, I have some colleagues around the country that in 2017 were looking into this because there was some similar dialogue whether officers would be kind of left holding the bag financially, so to speak. And that is absolutely a concern that some members of the law enforcement community have. They're afraid officers are going to lose their homes if there's a judgment. They are, where they did not, make, errors in the discharge of their duties. And as Jim mentioned, there are some serious concerns that there will be early retirements and there will be a tough time recruiting. So to make sure that the officers are protected where they should be protected is very important, even for recruiting purposes. So I don't know if there will be a financial impact right now regarding, the need to purchase additional coverage. Right at the moment, I don't think you need to purchase additional coverage. But what we don't know, and I think there will be a lagging trend here, is KERMA and other insurance carriers that provide law enforcement liability coverage to municipalities. They need to figure out next year, the following year, and the following year after that, what are the claim trends? Are they actually paying out a lot more money than they were? If they are, they will likely have to increase law enforcement liability premiums. They will pass those along, and obviously that could impact your budget. So what we'll do is we'll continue to follow this, and I will report I'll report to Jim, who can report to your board. If there's a need for me to get back on, either a virtual or in-person meeting or session, I'm more than happy to do that. And can I answer any questions?
This is Lynn Young. I have one. Can you explain to me, you said something about is there a conflict between the state law and the federal law at the moment? There is, right?
I appreciate that question, Lynn, because there's a lot of conjecture about this right now. You
have to actually attribute it to Bob Statchin because he gave me a primer on this a couple hours ago.
Bob may know more than me regarding this question, then, because I'm trying to figure out where the new legislation actually would differ as it relates to like law enforcement liability coverage. I haven't seen it just yet.
I'd like to, and this is Bob Statchin, just to follow up. My understanding is that the Connecticut, it doesn't conflict with federal law. What it is there's an additional defense that comes out of a 1982 Supreme Court case that requires that said that in order to prove a case, there had to be a substantially similar set of facts such that the government agent was aware that the conduct they were doing violated the constitutional rights of the plaintiff. But that's just since 1982. And that really is the only difference. And I'll point out that there's currently legislation, I believe, sponsored by Joe Courtney to remove this judicially created defense at the federal level as well. So it's not so much a conflict. It's just that at the state level, this is an attempt to remove that judicially created defense, and it will still, for a Section 1983 case at the federal level, it will still be in existence unless the legislation passes at the federal level. So that, and all I can, what I would say is thank you very much, Jim Sullivan. I think bringing Chris here was brilliant, and I really appreciate his input, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think him going through and sort of saying, I appreciate that, your thought is on Section 17, there's not going to be a cost increase. I don't know if you identified, Chris, whether for Section 29, is that, do you anticipate that section as well will not result in a cost increase, or
Yeah. So first off, Bob, thank you. Your ability to explain a very complicated subject is appreciated. As for that last question on 29, that'll connect to that phrase I use, like a lagging trend, so to speak. It will be difficult for KERMA, and this is my own professional, I guess, speculation. It'll be difficult for KERMA and other carriers to think about changing the pricing of their law enforcement liability coverage prior to July 1st, 2021, without really having any empirical evidence that there will be a measurable increase in the number as well as the dollars of law enforcement liability claims and resulting settlements and awards. And in part of the reason is obviously there can be more than a year that goes by between when there's an act committed by an officer, subsequent, service of suit, and then ultimately discussions with attorneys, plaintiffs, defendants, possible jury selection. So it takes so much time. If I'm KERMA, I'm probably scratching my head, and some other carriers would be doing the same thing. Some of them too, obviously Connecticut does not have, in many ways, the tort caps that some other states do. But, I think these carriers are going to have to be very specific to the state of Connecticut. And as you pointed out, what we don't know as well is we know today what, HB 6004 says. But if there's any possibility of an amendment to any of the language prior to July 1st, 2021, that obviously that changes this dialogue, and we'd have to research that and figure out how it impacts everything.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Chris, as well? Is it fair to say that before this statute was enacted, and I know it doesn't go until July next year, but before this, the only time an individual officer would be liable is if their conduct was malicious? Malicious, wanton, and willful. And is it fair to say that after this legislation, it's identical? The only time that they would be individually responsible is if their conduct is malicious, wanton, or willful. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's a correct statement.
So, but other than that, they would never be individually, and for malicious, wanton, and willful conduct before the statute came into place, you didn't cover that because you can't cover anyone's conduct that is malicious, wanton, or willful, correct?
Right. And we're saying
Chris, can I interrupt? This is Jim Sullivan. although Chris is experienced, very knowledgeable, he's not an attorney. I'm not comfortable in getting legal opinions out to the
And I'm
general
not,
public.
and Tim, I'm not looking for legal opinions, but at the end of the day, I am so appreciative that you brought him here, because at the end of the day, I think insurance companies who have a vested interest in the results of this and the analysis of this often do so much more legwork than other people. So I'm not looking for a legal opinion. I'm looking for what his perception of it is, because I think these are really important issues. And so I hope, and Chris, I hope you don't feel like I'm putting you on the spot in some way. Maybe it's just how I ask questions, because I'm a lawyer as well, so maybe I come off as abrupt. But I'm utterly appreciative, and I'm not asking to have this be relied upon. But I think it is fascinating to know the insurance industry's perception of these, and I understand it is evolving as well. So,
Right.
and I understand that, but I think it's invaluable. And again, I'm very appreciative that he's here.
No, thank you, and I appreciate your comments. And what Jim said is, and I also with what Jim said too. Obviously, I'm not a practicing attorney, but it actually is a good segue. So I think it was a week or two ago. It seems like time is fluid with the pandemic happening here, but CCM did sponsor a webcast, and there were 2 attorneys who spoke, and I believe that webcast is still available now.
Chris, we did circulate that through all of the Board of Finance have the access to the replay of that.
Okay.
I got more confused after it than before it started.
What's
So
that?
I got more confused after listening to it than before it started, because they were lawyers, and
Be
But-
nice.
no, I'm not being mean. You gave me a very rational, easy explanation to follow, and that CCM tape was not that.
Right. So what I wanted to bring up 2 points regarding that. And I'm in a lot of ways, I'm glad you're aware of it, even if you, if you listen to it, yes, there would believe me. But by the time you get done with the 90 minutes of listening, your head was spinning a little bit. But 2 points. The first one is both of those attorneys. One is Tom Gerard, who, and I know both of the attorneys, through my various travels and dialogue with our clients. Tom Gerard of Houghton Ludorf, he represents municipalities, and Jim Tallberg of Carson and Tallberg, his law firm as well. They're very experienced with representing municipalities with law enforcement liability claim matters. What I think will happen here is that sometime in the next probably 60 to 90 days, maybe a little bit earlier, there will be some follow-up webinars. I do believe that the legal community will continue to digest this and say, what does this mean? How does this really impact the municipality? And as Bob just said, really, like, what has changed? Can we, can we really look at what has changed as it relates to the exposure to officers or how they are measured based on what they do? This is a non-legal discussion, but it obviously connects greatly to legal language and concepts.
But it's also largely going to be about their perception of it, right? Because if they feel like they have less coverage because they're let's face it, under attack nationally and whatnot, that's going to govern their behavior and their union contracts and all of that kind of thing, right? So that's where a premium and a special policy per officer and whatnot may come in, not necessarily based on claims information or anything the lawyers sort out, but based on the behavior of the cops who think that, if they wind up in a courtroom, they're dead meat, right? Whether they were malicious or not.
Right.
They can't be covered for malicious conduct. The insurance companies won't cover them for that. So it's not like they could even go out and buy that. And this town, under their policy, covers them all the way through the litigation. So, I think it would be almost fraudulent for an insurance company to try to sell a policy for something that simply can't be insured.
Right.
Okay, so then basically what it comes down to for them, and just on a recruitment basis, and the things that this conversation started with is whether or not they think they'll get a fair shake no matter what. Forgetting about who pays for it and coverage and all of that kind of thing. So that was back to the
I don't-
social aspect.
Let
you
me
brought
jump
up.
in here for a second because I don't want to get too far down that route because I don't worry about who pays for it because we're the Board of Finance.
Well, no,
not
but there
the
might
Board
not
of-
be any money. That's what I'm trying to say. It might not be a money issue that we're
It might
talking
not
about.
be a money, correct. And that's kind of what I'm getting from what Chris is saying. It may not be a money issue so much as an issue for other sectors of the town, be it negotiations and that. And I think it was important to hear, Chris, what you're saying about what's covered now, where you guys see the risk moving forward, and that it is an evolutionary thing that's going to happen here as the CCM lawyers, as other lawyers, as the insurance companies take a look at it. And I think one of the big things to me is what you talked about was the KERMA lag that will probably happen because none of these processes are going to happen very quickly. So the financial impact really may be a lagging impact that we won't know maybe even for another year after it happens, based on what's already covered and what you guys are already doing.
Yeah, that's true. And one good thing that Stonington has going for it, and there are many things you have going for you, you have a great community, is that your police chief is, first off, he's very active. And while I don't know him personally, I have a lot of respect for him. He is active on a KERMA law enforcement advisory board. So it's a committee, and KERMA has a number of these for claims and loss prevention and school district and whatnot. But one of them is for law enforcement. And KERMA being part of CCM, there's a natural connection there. And I think that as, again, this dialogue continues over the next 1, 2, 3 months, we're going to see, I think your police chief will know what's going on.
Can I ask a KERMA question?
I'll do my best to answer it.
It's Lynn Young. So KERMA is the self-insurance thing, right?
Yeah, they're essentially like a municipal insurance pool backed by reinsurance.
Right. So if Norwich gets a lot of claims and Stonington has none, does that affect Stonington's premiums?
If there's a measurable impact with one of what we call the members of KERMA, I mean, they do operate as a pool. So what KERMA will do, not to speak directly for them, but they will underwrite based in part on the specific member's loss experience. So the premiums would be adjusted for that member. But if there's a measurable impact, it could affect all the members in some sort of pro rata basis. But there's a lot of individual underwriting that does take place. And, we have, of the 70 clients I mentioned, we have probably close to 30 who purchase coverage with KERMA and are members of KERMA. And, we saw some that actually went down, and in terms of premium, some went up a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Tim, it's Mike Sauerback. I just want to let you know I've been on the last maybe 15 minutes or so. Finally got my connection. Oh, you're muted, Tim.
Thank you, Roger. Sorry, I saw you come in, Mike. My internet just dropped out here, so hopefully I'm back again. Were there other questions for Chris at this time? Sorry, I missed the last minute.
I'd like one quick one, Chris. My understanding is Colorado is the only other state that has removed that defense from the 1982 Supreme Court case. Are you which and they did it fairly recently as well. Are you aware of any other states as far as establishing a baseline that passed a similar law, and whether it had any impact on insurance rates?
We're doing research. I don't at this point in time. If you would ask me if I'm aware of some of the presumptions on workers' comp with COVID-19, I'm probably a little bit farther ahead in that area.
I appreciate it, and it's a moving target. All I would ask is Jim, again, I want to thank you for setting up to have him. I think this is really this is getting down to the weeds and the nuts and bolts of this issue. And I think Chris is a perfect person to do it. If any information is provided, if your analysis changes, if you get additional information, I would appreciate if you could share that with the Board of Finance as this analysis develops.
Sounds great. Yeah, no, Jim and I we're sometimes he reaches out to me and sometimes I reach out to him when he's thinking about calling me, and and it's on a wide range of items, believe me. Yeah, we'll continue to stay in touch, and as I get, evidence and material developments, those types of things, or if we hear that there is a webcast with some speakers that are qualified in this, this subject, I'll make sure that Jim is aware of them as well, and he can cascade out, communications to the Board of Finance and others as he needs to, I'm sure. Thank you, Jim,
Chris,
too.
that's perfect. I appreciate it. Yeah. And
Before he goes, he mentioned the word COVID. Can I ask one unrelated to the police question about that? Which is this? If we open up the schools and a teacher, gets COVID and can demonstrate it came from little Johnny and whatnot, is that covered under this $5K, $1 million liability thing and whatnot?
No, so it wouldn't fall under the liability coverage. The workers' compensation. So the town purchases, and in the school district, they purchase a workers' compensation policy,
Okay.
and that policy will respond to claims made by employees for occupational injury or occupational illness.
Okay.
And what will happen is KERMA will assign an adjuster, so it's a live human being right here in Connecticut, who will investigate the circumstances surrounding that claim. So surrounding there's a diagnosis of COVID, they'll look at the circumstances. They will obviously follow the law. So if there's been, say, an executive order that's been issued, they will follow the law, and then they will render, a coverage opinion at that point in time. Lynn, I would love to say that something is either covered or not covered, but as you probably know, if you had 10,000 claims, you'd probably see about 5,000 different situations that happen. And today, with the fluidity of COVID-19 and with individuals traveling here and there and living with family members who may or may not have traveled, it ends up really being fact specific. But I can assure you, KERMA did, and other carriers as well that write municipal workers' comp, these carriers have set up special claim handling functions, procedures, and they have specific people who are very knowledgeable to make sure that they follow the law, but they also work to make sure that the employees are treated, professionally, that their supervisors understand what's happening, and they go from there.
But we have coverage if a teacher dies as a consequence of it or something like that, and the family sues or pick your situation. The town is covered, so we shouldn't be too concerned about, massive bills coming at the Board of Finance, say in November, if we open schools in September.
Again, if a person dies, how is it that they died? Obviously there's workers' comp coverage. There may be employee benefits. I don't know, Jim, any comments on that one?
No, I think it's a bit unfair to ask such a question off and expect to have an answer off the cuff. This is a pretty complicated issue with serious legal ramifications. If something like that were to happen, I'm not comfortable with. I think we should talk to an attorney about that rather than at this moment.
Okay, no, that's fine. I wasn't trying to put anybody on the spot, but it raised a question I hadn't thought of, which is whether or not we have to start thinking about what could happen, in the school.
Yeah, we can have these conversations offline and
great.
engage the other guys to make sure that we don't have an exposure that we didn't anticipate. So, Chris, I'd like to on and being part of this, and also continue the line of conversation with Jim. That's the best way, and Jim is good about disseminating through the rest of us. So just stay with Jim directly, and he'll get it to the rest of us. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I will drop off this call officially at this point in time, but obviously know if there are follow-up questions, funnel them through Jim. He and I will talk and we'll proceed from there.
Will do. Great. Thanks, Chris.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Stay safe. Thank you, guys.
You too. All right. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is correspondence. I don't believe we have any, do we? Jim or Jill that I don't know about?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Nope, I don't have anything here.
Great. Thank you. Next, liaison reports. SIP liaison, we're going to skip past that one for right now. There's a little bit going on there, but nothing to report. And I am not the liaison. There's conversations with town hall as we're getting prepped already. WPCA, Lynn, is there anything? Lynn, you're muted. Or am I out again?
Oh, you're still there, Tim. I think Lynn's.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Lynn, did we lose you?
Let me unmute her. Stand by.
Thanks.
Lynn, you're live.
Yes, it is beautiful.
Lynn,
Okay.
okay, Roger, you can mute her again.
Copy that. Lynn.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Board Head, Mr. Frischman.
No, I'm gonna mute
Glenn, we got to unmute you.
The conversation with the chief, you may.
Hey,
probably
Glenn,
seen
sorry,
that.
you were muted for longer than you thought. Can you start again, please?
All right.
Okay.
All right.
There are other costs associated with that bill that Chris did not discuss. Then I had some correspondence and a conversation with the chief. For instance, the mental health testing. 20% of the sworn officers have to be tested every year. That's $11,000, and if anyone fails this shrink test, the remediation would be paid for by the town. You can have counseling or something like that. Drug testing is going to be another $2,000 a year. The big cost is dash and body cams. We're going to need 50 body cams and 16 dash cams at a cost between $300 and $350K exclusive of the required IT support, because all those videos are subject to subpoena or FOI. So we have to have someone who can extract that and do that. So there's our, massive IT bill that could easily approach, $1 million. We also, in that bill, is a requirement that the town's police become CALEA, Commission on Law Enforcement Accreditation. So we have to be nationally accredited. Now there's the fee for the accreditation is 6 to 10. A small police force like the city of Groton, we've got 30 sworn officers. We have 45 plus some admin staff. They did this by having the deputy chief, who was a former internal affairs commander for the state police, and part of one full-time officer's time just to do, and they achieved accreditation. The town of Groton has contracted with a law firm for an initial fee of $75,000 to start in order to manage accreditation. The initial training cost is going to be required all officers to complete update on use of force, and that's going to cost between $15 and $20,000. And then we have a directed social service support study that within 6 months, the PD will have to evaluate the feasibility of social workers assisting police officers on calls. I'm trying to be very calm about that. I think with regard to a civilian review board, we have a civilian police commission. I think that's going to suffice, but it'll probably need a review from the town attorney. These are some additional costs that are coming down the pipe, and I think all of us as members need to be aware of this.
Glenn, what is that total?
Well, if you throw in the accreditation and the man hours, we're talking probably, and all the IT support, probably $1.3 million.
That includes the body. That includes the body cams.
Body cams and dash cams.
Don't we get, Glenn, does that include some of the reimbursement from the state, though? Will the state help supplement some of those costs for the body cams and dash cams?
30% is what the state is talking about.
Right. So are those numbers inclusive of that?
much on state reimbursement, given their track record.
Well, sorry,
Well,
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I think that the reimbursement is projected around 30%, but it was not in the bill specifically. So I think that is still being sorted as we move forward. And there is a year basically before this becomes enacted or anything's got to happen. So there's a lot of moving parts between now and July 1st, I think, is really what we're coming down to. And right now it's projected costs, but what state reimbursement may or may not be, also where the state of COVID-19 is and where the state of a lot of other things is going to really affect that moving forward. We're going to have to watch pretty closely, but I think right now we've got estimates, and there's still a lot of moving parts about this. There's nothing that has to be spent soon. What has to be spent soon is a lot of time getting our arms around what really the costs and requirements are going to be. So I think we've got more work to do. Would that be correct, Glenn?
That would be very correct. I mean, these are just preliminary. It's like a walk through the park, but it's something we need to be aware of because we have no idea. The legislature didn't fund any of this. The only thing that was discussed is possible reimbursement for body cams. Everything else the town's going to have to pay.
Glenn, is that cost analysis available to the rest of the board? I think it's very interesting, and I think you're right that it's not just insurance. There are other costs involved, but is that cost analysis from the chief? Can we have the rest of the board have that?
But this is just a brief, look at the things, the costs, the implied costs in the bill to municipalities that the chief did for me. So, and again, the legislature did not embody any funding in the act. There was discussion about a 30% reimbursement for body cams, but the big nut in the body cams is all the ongoing IT support, and accreditation is a big deal.
Yeah,
Bob, to answer your question, I got a back of the envelope initial look from the chief. I thought I had passed it along to you guys. I will make sure right after this meeting I pass it along to everybody on the Board of Finance, so you'll see that they're preliminary numbers. They are not anything that is set in stone, but it was the first estimate to look at it.
Tim,
Good.
oh, sorry, I was going to move on to another liaison update.
Okay.
All right.
I keep dropping out, so I don't even know where we are. My internet's going in and out, apparently, or someone's is. Where are we at?
We're down in the liaison reports.
Oh, okay. I heard police costs of something.
Yeah, well, we kind of went through. Glenn, as the police liaison, was doing some of that. And Lynn, do you have anything for the WPCA?
No, we're very happy to have our $10 million. Turns out we may need it more than we even thought. So that's good. One interesting thing happened. There was some possibility that Westerly has to do their sewer system. They're under a consent decree and whatnot. And, there was a preliminary inquiry made as to whether or not, Stonington might have any interest in tying into their system. But before we get too excited, we went that route with Groton once, and there's a lot of impediments to it. But it was an interesting and possibly, would remove a lot of siting issues for us in our future plan to get to one plant or even to limit the number that we have. So it was interesting to note.
Interesting. All right, thank you. Mike Feuerbach, did you have a liaison report?
Yep, just briefly from the town side, want to let you know that got a note from Linda earlier this week on tax collections, and pleasant surprise, or we continue to be pleasantly surprised. She let me know that we're actually up $500,000 more than we were at this time last year, and that a lot of folks are continuing to pay both installments rather than just the first 6 months installment when they're paying, and and a lot of folks are using the online system as well as continuing to use mail. So, so far so good. Knock on wood here, but things are coming along okay, and she will start sending out delinquency notices next week. For those who now missed the first deadline, but things are, I think, in better shape than we perhaps were anticipating at this juncture. So just wanted to share that news.
I like getting good news.
Yeah.
I had heard that, and I wondered if it was because so many people had put the word out that, we might be hard up on cash flow, and so people who could pay their bill, pay both installments should and whatnot. But then I talked to a lot of people who did, and I found out that they did it because they're terrified they're not going to be able to make the January payment because, the unemployment's going to run out and they're not going to have any money, so they don't want to lose their house. So, it's, yes, we have more money, but the reasons for it weren't all because people were flush with cash. It was more fear than anything else.
So no good news for Tim.
Sorry.
Thanks, Lynn.
Celebrate our successes when we can.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going with Mike. We're going to make this a positive. I'm taking it as a positive. Are there any other liaison reports? Roger, can you unmute Glenn for a second? Glenn,
be unmuted.
do you want to go over any of the school stuff?
Well, I have had a preliminary conversation with the newly elected chairman of the Board of Ed, and he's going to need some time to wrap his arms around a number of issues. The critical issue right now is the $164,000 of legal fees that apparently were spent without the board's express knowledge. And that's going to take Mr. Tedesco a little time to get a handle on. But I have absolute faith in Frank Tedesco. I'm sure he will straighten this mess out.
All right.
Tim?
Yep.
It's Lynn. So on August 14th or whenever it is, whenever they formalize the plan for the go back to school, both of those plans required funds likely that will be in addition to what we escrowed or at least the one plan that they're looking at now, in addition to what we escrowed and what they might kick back to us. What's the procedure going to be to give them the money that they need in a budget year that's already done?
Jim Sullivan, you want to weigh in on that one?
Give them money for 1920?
For this budget year.
For 2021. For the additional encumbrances that they're going to need for opening schools safely.
So they have their appropriation. If they need money above and beyond that, they're going to have to come to the Board of Finance and ask for an additional appropriation.
Well, yeah, but suppose they need $500,000. We can't do that much under. What do we have to do? Go back to a referendum?
I mean, if they need $500,000 to open up, they have $500,000. We're not going to know until you get till January where they're actually running lower funds, unless they have a really good detailed budget of how they expect that to unfold. But yeah, if they need more money, and if they need $1 million additional appropriation, they have to go to town meeting, or I would expect maybe there might be some another executive order saying if schools are going to open up, they need this kind of funding. If it's not coming from the state in lieu of money, they might give Board of Education's the power to draw on those finances from the town coffers. I don't know what's going to happen to Lynn, so I don't think anybody knows yet.
Okay, so basically,
right now, what would have to happen was we'd have to go back to a town meeting.
As it stands today.
As it stands today, right now, this second, yeah.
Okay, but the fact of the matter is, as we look at the fund balance that we have and everything else, we have to consider, a bunch of stuff flying at us that we don't, that could amount to millions of dollars, that we haven't anticipated in the current budget for this year, right? But between the police for next year, we know that's going to happen. We don't know what the amount is, but something's going to happen. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's going to cost something. It's just nobody's quite sure what it's going to cost yet.
Right, but we know, yeah.
Well,
so-
even the police would be FY 21-22.
No, I understand that.
You know-
I understand that. But as far as like the schools and stuff go, and we think about our, our fund
Right.
balance and whatnot, you could look at it as it's under attack from 3 different directions, right? So,
Yes.
So just get
Yeah,
back to the
that-
police for a second. Just get back to the police for a second. I expect, come next July, I don't, even though it'll be it's legislation, I got to imagine between now and then they're going to allow for some kind of rollout. You don't have to have body cams on every officer, body cam or dash cams in every car. This just seems to me impractical and impossible, actually. So I got to think, for the police stuff, there's going to be some kind of phased, rollout of that. But as far as the school, yes, it's, they'll let us know what they need at some point.
okay.
Just on the topic of Board of Ed matters, and apologies because I was late, but I did see in the attachments for today's meeting the fiscal year end balances and transfers. Has that come through yet? Was that discussed?
No,
That was
no, it
discussed,
hasn't.
Mike, and the typical timing for that would be closer to mid-September for that all to happen. So there's nothing at this point for us to take a look at.
That would be great. I mean, anything we can do to keep the pressure on them to get that squared away, or I think that then feeds into some of the points Lynn was making a moment ago.
The only tidbit of information I did have was I saw a memo that was presented to the Board of Education from the Finance Department that they expected, anticipated, I forget already, about $350,000 or $360,000 surplus for fiscal end 1920.
Which neatly coincides with the amount of money they promised us months ago, right? It's not in addition to that. That's the money
No,
they said they
that's
were going to
correct.
kick.
No.
That's correct. All right, we are at the end of liaison reports. The next item on the agenda is to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. It's Mike.
Second, Bob Stachin.
Motion from Mike, second to Bob. Bob, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Appreciate your help and time.
Stay there.
Bye. Tim, I'll miss hearing your voice 3 times for every word you said.
I'm just so good.